welcome to Pharmacist Diaries. I'm so excited to say that to you because I have been following you, Tim, since your journey with Your Financial Pharmacist in 2017. I was pregnant and I was living in Abu Dhabi, and I listened to so many podcasts back then on car journeys because I was traveling from Dubai to Abu Dhabi for work. So it was like hour and a half each way. And I had so many podcasts on the go, but mainly like health and well-being, kind of fitness related podcasts, nutrition, kind of all the food stuff. I was really interested in that back then, still am, but really interested in that. And then I obviously got into pregnancy and birthing podcasts for quite a while. And then I was like, I haven't actually checked if there's anything pharmacy related. And yours came up just when you started. And I remember your first episode was about how to be a millionaire in pharmacy, or why we should all be pharmacy millionaires. And then I enjoyed listening to all the episodes on amazing stories of people paying off, obviously, all their student loans and how important it is to get a financial planner. And back then, we were thinking about coming back to the UK, and because we earned a good salary back and tax-free in the Emirates, we wanted to use that money towards buying our first home. So financial planning kind of just became a big part of my radar. So my pharmacy podcasting journey kind of started with you.
So fun. I'm so glad to hear that. And I think that's one of the beautiful things about podcasting, right? Here we are having an opportunity to meet and talk with one another. And in a previous world and generation, our paths probably wouldn't have crossed, right? I mean, it's it's an incredible medium. And I think that's one of the fun things when you start podcasting. When I started back in 2017, you know, when you start to get over that initial anxiety of, okay, how does my voice sound in the microphone? And do I have something valuable to say? And will people listen? And all the things that typically allow a podcast to not go on for very long, right? Once you work through those, you then start to see like, wow, like this is really having an impact. And I have always said, and I hope I maintain this throughout the time that I'm doing the work that we're doing around personal finance. For every time I hear one story of, hey, I listened to this show, or I read this blog post, or I read one of your books, and I did X, Y, or Z, or it ignited a passion, you know, for me in my own journey. One of those stories is forever worth the time and the effort that have gone in. And so to see those compound over time and have opportunities to, you know, to cross paths with someone like yourself is so fun. So thank you for the opportunity to be here and for listening along in your journey as well.
Yeah, no worries. I'm very grateful and have been looking forward to this for some time now. I guess we could start the episode by asking you why you became a pharmacist in the first place.
You know, I wish I had a really awesome story about how I got into pharmacy. And I spent a little over a decade in various academic roles. And part of those roles, I got to interview pharmacy applicants and would read these incredible essays about their passion for the profession of pharmacy. You know, sometimes it might have been a family member that experienced an illness, or, you know, third, fourth, fifth generation pharmacist that was an inspiration of the story. And that really was not the case for me. You know, I went to pharmacy school right out of high school. I was at the ripe age of 18, and I loved science and math. My parents told me, hey, you better go to college. That was the expectation. And I remember talking with a guidance counselor, and they're like, hey, have you thought about pharmacy school? You like science, you like math? And I was like, honestly, no, I haven't. And I ended up shadowing an independent pharmacist in the hometown where I grew up, which is in Buffalo, New York. And I thought, yeah, this is pretty cool. You know, pharmacists make a decent income. Looks like they have a good career. It's a doctorate degree. It's well respected. And so that really was my story into pharmacy. And it was really the transformation that happened in pharmacy school that I've always said pharmacy and being a pharmacist is really just a part of the journey. But it's really not defining of who I am. And I think as I think about myself now and really working on business, and I grew up in a small business environment, like with each passing year, it feels like the dots are making sense as I look backwards. And pharmacy is an interesting part of that story, but it wasn't a defining part of the story. And so I graduated from Ohio Northern University in 2008 with my doctorate degree. I did a year of residency partly because I felt like, hey, that's what I should do. Not really sure what the next step is. Fell in love with teaching during residency, and from there would go into a few academic roles before I started the business journey.
And how did you get into pharmacy school directly from high school? Because obviously, I've talked to a few American pharmacists, and I studied my undergraduate, my first degree in the US when I was living in Virginia. And I did the 4 years in biology with a minor in
Mhm.
chemistry, and then applied for my PCATs, etc. afterwards. How did you go straight from high school?
Yeah, this is interesting. We're actually seeing there's not many out there. There's certainly been a drop off. It never was a majority, but a drop off in the number of what we call 0 to 6 PharmD programs, where essentially your bachelor's and your doctorate degree are all rolled up into one. And what intrigued me in part about the university I went to, which is Ohio Northern University, is that it didn't require me to take the PCAT going directly into, which is the pharmacy admissions test that often schools will require, whether it's direct entry or after doing a bachelor's degree, similar to like the MCAT going into medical school. And I wasn't great at standardized tests. And so I was trying to find a way, hey, how do I get around that, but still get into pharmacy school? And my university specifically, interestingly, I think they just changed this a couple years ago, but they did not issue a bachelor's degree while we were there. So it really was straight to a doctorate degree. I don't have a bachelor's degree on record, which, to be honest, like, I don't love that model. If I had to go back and do it again, I think there's real value in having both some of the time and the years of experience, as well as a bachelor's degree if you decide to pivot and change. I probably could have easily put together a bachelor's degree with a lot of the courses that I put together, but it wasn't something that was completed as a part of the PharmD program. So if you know with 100% certainty that pharmacy is your thing, and there's no question about that, you could argue a 0 to 6 program is the fastest way. I guess I would challenge that by saying, how many folks at 18 years old know with 100% certainty what they want to do with the rest of their lives? And I thought it was a good fit. And obviously I've taken some variations in my career path in the first 15 years, but I think it's always good to have options. And I think a bachelor's degree and being have some of those options can be really valuable.
Yeah, 100%. And you're right. And I've talked about this before in terms of age. It's very difficult to know what it is that you'd like to do at the age of 18. And
That's right.
in England, it's very different. You finish high school, and actually, when you're in your last 2 years, so say your junior and senior year of high school, you cut down from all of the kind of regular subjects that you would do in high school to just 3 or 4 of your main subjects. So from 16, you have to actually choose. In fact, from 15, you probably have to make those choices as to what to start when you're 16. So if you're going down the medical route or pharmacy route, you automatically need to go down the scientific side. So you're kind of taking biology, chemistry. And those choices then lead you to certain university options.
That's right.
So, students are having to make decisions about their career so early. And there probably isn't as much career advice in the UK as I saw when I lived in the US and went through high school. I think a lot of children rely on their families to, like, parents to support them in that journey, which is great. But still, you don't exactly know where your skills are, what you're passionate about. And then you start university and you feel like potentially you might want to pivot somewhere else, but because you're spending so much on your fees, etc., there is kind of some limitations in terms of trying to change pathways. I think the US system works really, really well, especially when I did the 4 years in biology and chemistry. I mean, the first year was just loads of different core subjects, from psychology, sociology. I did weightlifting. I did interior design. There was a lot of opportunity to try other things and enjoy other things, because who wants to just be doing science
That's right.
all throughout? So I really loved the US system for that. And here, like, I teach first year pharmacy students, or I was teaching first year pharmacy students, and they're very, like, naive and green in a cute way, in a nice way. I have so many students listening in, but they're very new to what a career is going to be like. They're new to even understanding what a pharmacist does in a job. They have, a limited kind of vision of what it looks like because of how it's perceived by the public. So you've got your high street pharmacy, you've got people working in hospitals, you've got people working in industry. And that's kind of like the main three areas that students are aware of, but there's so much more available. So, of course, for me, this platform is just perfection because it gives everyone so much information about what type of roles you can have, what kind of skills you need, what people have been passionate about and how they've transitioned, like from one role to another and kind of following your dreams. So when I get that feedback, the same as you do, it's so rewarding and it just makes me feel like I have to continue this journey. Like I cannot stop this podcast because it's making so many people happy and people are just changing their lives. They're changing jobs. And that's down partly to listening in to people's stories, which is just amazing.
It is amazing. And I think that there is definitely a movement here in the US, I suspect abroad, of a broadening of the view of what a pharmacist potentially could be doing. And that's one of the things I love about the podcast platform is I get to share people's stories, whether it's their financial journeys and paying off debt or saving for investing for the future or starting a nonprofit, whatever would be their journey and their story. I think those are inspiring, but also sharing many examples of pharmacists that are starting businesses and going into non-traditional, different career paths. And I think, again, back to my comment a few moments ago about a pharmacist roles and identity, I think so often too early we get narrowed into a pathway of, I'm going to be a hospital pharmacist or I'm going to be a community pharmacist, or because I'm a pharmacist, I could do X, Y, and Z. And when I would advise many students from a career standpoint, there was very much this feeling of I'm either going to go do a residency or I'm going to go work in community practice. And when you look at the pie chart of the workforce surveys in the US, it definitely is shifting, but still that makes up the majority of the pie, either those that are working in community practice or those that are, working the hospital pathway, which typically requires a residency, here in the States. And what most intrigues me is the split of the rest of that pie. And I think what we're seeing is the options are growing and the size of that piece of the pie is growing as well. And I think that's what we need to be thinking about in pharmacy education and reimagining the educational experience and perhaps bringing back things like apprenticeships and exposure and, really having these models where, to me, the value of a degree training program is exposure, exposure, exposure. There's so few times in your life, when you look at something like a summer internship or a rotation, when you can have 3 months or a month or a season of life where your primary role and purpose is to really embed yourself in an environment and soak up as much as you can before you go on and do that again somewhere else. What an incredible opportunity. And so I think the more we can define the classroom experience and perhaps even maybe less classroom and more experiential, I think the better. But it's an exciting time. I mean, there's a lot of disruption, no question, that's going on in our profession, but with disruption comes incredible opportunity. And I think we have a generation who is coming out saying, wow, how might I use the PharmD in a way that can help solve the many problems in our healthcare systems that need to be solved, of which a pharmacist is so well positioned to be solved? And how can I overlay some entrepreneurial thinking, whether that's within an organization or whether that's their own business, to really tackle these problems? And that's exciting. Potentially frightening, for some, but I think it's really exciting that, that pathway that you're going to walk into and do the same thing for 40 years, that's not happening. When you look at healthcare and what's happening with disruption and technology, there is no way that someone graduating at 25 or 30 is likely going to be in a very similar and stable role for 30 or 40 years. And so that adaptability, is such a rich characteristic that I think we're seeing graduates today embrace, which is an exciting time.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. In the UK, actually, there's a few universities now. So once you finish your 4 years of pharmacy here, you do a 1 year, it's like an internship, similar to the US. It's called a trainee pharmacist year. So it's your training year. You get paid for this year that you're working. There are certain standards that you have to complete, and you have to demonstrate those utilizing evidence throughout the year. You have 3 appraisals. with your mentor throughout that time. And then at the end of the year, you have an exam. Obviously, you have to pass the exam to become a pharmacist. But what universities are doing now is they're trying to integrate that 1 year by splitting it into 2 separate 6 months of training in the kind of second year, and then towards the end, the 4th year or 5th year of the course. So you're getting students coming into a work environment really, really early on. And they also don't just come into a hospital. They can do a split of, going into retail, going into hospital. And then from there, those students have so much more awareness of what pharmacists are doing, where they could fit in, what types of skills that they need in order to do those jobs. And they truly understand what it's like to be an employee. And it's not just you get hit in the face at the end of your 4 years, like, oh my goodness, like, I have to work, I'm done with my student life. And that's making quite a big impact. And also in terms of academia, things are really, really changing for us now, because here we can, pharmacists are now have the ability to prescribe medications. So they're setting up all sorts of clinics, whether this is in hospitals. We are working with primary care physicians. So we would set up, say, a respiratory clinic, asthma clinic, cardiology clinic, diabetes clinic, pediatrics, emergency. There are unlimited options. You pick a scope during the prescribing course as to what it is you intend on prescribing, and you kind of stick to that, and you can mold it or expand it once you've completed the course, but you kind of stick to that one little area. So it's like 4 to 5 medications to start with, and then you can kind of grow. And what the universities are now aiming to do is have every pharmacy student graduate as a prescriber, which is a big, scary change for pharmacy, especially when you've got such young students coming out from university. And are they going to be competent at putting that pen to paper and prescribing a medication?
Now we know how medical students feel, right, when they're coming out.
Yeah, it's such a massive responsibility, but this is what they are transitioning towards. So there's a lot of talk in academia at the moment as to how to make that happen, how to keep it safe. But it's an exciting time. Like you say, pharmacy is changing, it's evolving. There's so much available for us in terms of what we can do within this career, and also transitioning from one job to another. You don't have to stick to a job for 30 to 40 years. Right. Like, you can change every couple of years, or, I felt really bad leaving my job. I wanted to be loyal to my employer, and I felt really guilty moving out to Dubai, and leaving the NHS, our National Health Service. I was like, oh, this is terrible. Like, it looks really bad for me on my CV to just, up and leave. But, you come around to the idea of change and how it actually builds who you are, and how it actually kind of impacts your strengths as a pharmacist. So tell me, I guess, during university, how did you discover that academia was for you?
It's interesting. While I was in school, never even crossed my mind. I kind of was thinking a very traditional route into community practice, residency. I actually thought I was going to go the pathway of hospital pharmacy administration. I did 2 summer internships at Johns Hopkins in Baltimore, one in critical care, quickly realized critical care was not for me. And then I did one in health policy outcomes and research, which just opened up a whole new avenue of thought of, I had no idea that a pharmacist might be doing something that's not practice related, and really applying that knowledge in a different area. And so that, I think, really opened up my eyes to that concept of a pharmacist that holds a degree and is a registered pharmacist, but might be using that in a different way than direct patient care. And didn't think anything about teaching. Honestly, was frightened to death of public speaking and other things, which probably detracted me from that, and found myself in a residency program that had a large component of teaching involved with it. So I did residency at Ohio State, connected to a large academic medical center. Education, teaching students in the practice site in the classroom was a big part of the training program. And through that experience, really was somewhat kind of forced my hand in all types of teaching experiences, rotation at the site, large group, small group, all types of, large lectures, all different types of experiences. And I just fell in love with that ability to work and connect and impact students in real time. And I love the challenge of, could I find a way to either present the material or get them thinking differently, or really more than anything, stimulate their thinking and learning, with the idea that I quickly realized, much of what we're teaching, the delivering of the content really has little value when you think about it, right? Much of that is available in textbooks. It's changing by the year, sometimes by the month or the week. And so the most important thing I can do as an effective educator is really stimulate their desire to learn and them wanting to continue to learn and that have that motivation themselves. And I love that challenge. And I think that largely developed, my skill set as an ongoing learner and voracious reader and all of those things as well. And so went from that experience into an academic position. And then just like I kind of got into residency and didn't realize what the opportunities were, I got into the academic role thinking I would be doing traditional teaching and traditional practice, spending my time in both, which is a very common model here in the US, where you might have a faculty member who's 50% of the time in practice, 50% of the time at the college, or some variation of that. And about 2 or 3 years in, I kind of had this realization of like, I kind of like the patient care, but I love the academic side. I love working with students and career counseling. And so I found myself really going more and more that route, and really had to work through some of my own head trash of, hey, am I okay with being a pharmacist, but not being a practicing pharmacist? And I joke with my family now. Obviously, I didn't think it was a joke in that moment, and as I was internally wrestling with that. But I always joke with my family, like, if you have a question, a pharmacy question, you need to go talk to your local pharmacist. I have not seen a patient in now over a decade. But what's been so fun about that journey is I've leaned into it, first in teaching and now in a lot of the work I'm doing at the business, is while I'm not directly providing patient care, I'm really educating in a much different way of obviously reaching a broader group of people who are then in direct patient care roles. And that was really the piece that allowed me to lean into that. Say my strengths are really in motivating others, inspiring others, challenging them to think differently, think bigger. And I was doing that in an academic environment. I'm now doing it with the business. And through that, I really feel like I have an opportunity to influence many, many clinicians who are going to reach many more patients than I would have ever seen one-on-one. So it's been a journey, and it's been a fun one. But I think it's just another example of, there are so many pathways that one can go with their degree, and to always have an open mind, not only where you start, but to your point, you can change, right? And nothing is holding you back. I know sometimes we feel that pressure, that loyalty to an employer, but part of evolving and growing throughout our career is going to come through change. It's going to come through different experiences. And I think while sometimes that's uncomfortable, that's where at least I've seen in my own life, when I lean into something where I'm like, that's interesting, but I don't really know a whole lot about it. That's where I really see a lot of the monumental gains, internally, of seeing myself and seeing some of that growth moving forward.
Did you find that you felt very guilty leaving the patient-facing role and that aspect of pharmacy, because you've studied so much clinical content during your pharmacy degree, and it's kind of drilled into us, from the get-go, that this is kind of, the majority of pharmacists go down this traditional pathway. You've worked so hard to get here. You've spent so much money to get to this point, and boom, you decide to leave. Because I'm in that place.
Yeah.
I feel like it's very difficult to move and step aside.
I thought I did, but when I got a layer deeper, I realized that what I thought was guilt, really there was something else there. And, to your point, I was often thinking like, man, I've spent over $200,000 in student loan debt. That was a big part of my journey. I spent umpteen hours in the classroom and studying. I did a year of residency, which is highly clinical in nature. And technically, I'm going a path, and that's become more and more true each year. I'm going a path of which like less than, 5% of those, hours that I spent, I'm applying in what I'm doing, each and every day. But obviously, as I've been able to connect those dots a little bit more looking backwards, like every one of those steps was an important step to opening another door that's allowed me to lean more into the experiences that most resonate with me and that really draw out the strengths that I think I have. And it wouldn't have happened without, completing a pharmacy degree, which led me to a residency program, which led me to another experience, which led me, down to a path, and then eventually gave me a platform to kind of work on the personal finance piece. So I think with those connections, I feel a lot of peace there. What I was alluding to, though, is I think in the moment, the surface level feeling was, I feel a little bit of guilt. I've spent a lot of time and money, and now I'm not going to use that. I think what was really behind that, though, was what I thought other people thought about me making that decision. And I think once I was able to really work through that and kind of call myself out on how ridiculous that probably was. And I think for those that are closest to me and know the strengths and know who I am, it's probably a very clear path of why I'm doing what I'm doing now and how I got to this point. But I think there was more of wrestling with what is this perception that other people may or more likely may not have, but I've convinced myself that they may have, of what I should be doing based on the degree I have, based on the residency I have, based on the position. And I got to work through that again when I left the academic environment. So the first real transition was not practicing at all, but I was still in, teaching. I was still in the academy. The second transition was I'm walking away altogether from a quote traditional pharmacy role to work full-time on a business. And that was another kind of evolution of I've spent over a decade. I've gone through the promotion ranks of academia. I've checked all the boxes of publications and presentations and getting promoted. And like, I was supposedly at that point where a lot of people feel like, hey, I've kind of gotten to this place. And like, not that it's easy from there on out, but like a lot of the hard work has been done. And this is really the part where you really reward in that journey. And I made that decision of, hey, I'm ready to leave that so I can go pursue and work on, the business and the financial wellness. And again, I had to really step back and reflect on how much of an unsettled feeling am I truly feeling, and how much of this is what I think is the perception of what other people might think. So I really think it was probably more of that was behind it than it was even true feelings of, guilt that I've invested a lot of time and money in this degree.
Fair enough. I recently listened to one of your episodes, which was about your personal kind of top 10 tips for moving towards a life as an entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
Know your why
mm-hmm.
comes to mind.
Mm-hmm.
Because I'm working like personally on, I know what my why is, but I want to visualize it. I want it on paper, and I want it to be like the best kind of mission statement that there is,
Mm-hmm.
because every time that I have those feelings of guilt, which I don't want to use that word. It's not guilt. It's quite natural what I'm feeling. And it's you,
That's right.
You do get a little bit of anxiety when you transition from one role to another. But a really strong and clear like mission statement as to what I want to achieve is really valuable. I guess tell us a little bit about your journey as to why Your Financial Pharmacist started, and what place you were in, and how you kind of figured that out.
Yeah, I'd love to. And I would just, word of encouragement for your listeners with the know your why is really to pay attention to what are the moments in the day or the week, what are the experiences that are happening that you feel so lit up with energy, right? Regardless of sleep or caffeine intake or anything, that you feel like you're so on fire that, time goes by and you don't realize it. Or, others that are around you, they can give you that feedback that say, hey, I see your eyes light up. Like, what are those moments? What are those experiences? And just reflecting on them and recording them is so important. And then on the other side of the coin is, what are those things that you do that you might only do them for 15 or 30 minutes, but you feel like it's sucking the energy out of you, right? What are those experiences? And, we have to be realistic, right? It's not that we can create the perfect day every day where we're spending 100% of our time in those things that are bucket filling and 0% of the time in things that are not. Part of a job means we're obviously being hired to do work of which, hopefully much of the time we love that work. Sometimes we may not. So there's of course this balance, but just be aware of those internal feelings and emotions and reflect and record on those along the way. And that very much was a part of the journey for me and Your Financial Pharmacist, because when I first started writing about this topic under the brand Your Financial Pharmacist in 2015, I felt that kind of emotion rising up, but I hadn't yet embraced it or owned it. And with each passing year, I've leaned more and more and more into it as I've gotten more comfortable in my skin. And I really have been able to continue to see the impact that it's having on others as well. So long story short, I went through a journey of, as I mentioned, I graduated in 2008, accruing and paying off way too much student loan debt. And when I had the opportunity to talk with a group of pharmacists here in the States, and I talk about student loan debt, and I talk about my journey of a couple $100,000, I usually get no emotional reaction to that number because it's become such a normal part of the journey for many of my peers and colleagues across the country. Right now, the average indebtedness of a pharmacy graduate in the U.S. is about $160,000. It's been on a steady rise. In 2010, that number was close to 100. We peaked at 170,000 a couple of years ago. It's actually dipped a little bit here in the last couple of years. And frankly, we've become numb to that number, 160, 170. I'll talk to pharmacists, 200, 250, $300,000. And the reason why I was so passionate about that in my own journey, and it's what I hear from pharmacists every single week, is often the financial pain someone is feeling. Maybe it's from student loans. Maybe it's because they feel like they're behind on their investments or their savings. Maybe it's because they're, trying to balance multiple priorities at once and they don't feel like they're doing any of them very well. Maybe it's because them and a partner aren't, kind of optimized with the plan working together. Or one of the things I'll often hear is, Tim, I make a great income, but I feel like I'm not progressing financially like I could be or should be. And those are nagging feelings that can really erode at your confidence and really impact your ability to be the best version of you as a pharmacist, but more importantly, as potentially a parent or a spouse or a friend, as it trickles into every single area of our life. And I felt that in my own journey, which is what really led me to start writing and blogging about it. I didn't know where that journey would go. It truly was a hobby, which turned into a side hustle, which turned into a business. I remember specifically right before I wrote the blog post in the fall of 2015, I emailed 100 of my closest friends and colleagues in pharmacy, said, hey, I'm thinking about starting a personal finance blog. Like, are you interested? And in hindsight, I guess many of them probably said yes, because that was a nice thing to do as a friend. But that became the start of my email list, which, now we have a little over 15,000 pharmacists across the country that engage with us in that platform. And I share that because that first step, as you lean into your why and really embrace this, and it feels scary and overwhelming, and, am I the right person to be talking about this? And what are other people going to think? That's scary. And usually it can be paralyzing. And that first step is, as John Acuff talks about in the book Start, is so important to building the momentum for step number 2 and step number 3 in the journey. And so it was really a matter of going through a lot of highs and lows personally, financially, feeling like I was dealing with a lot of that really in a silo, and that there wasn't a community of pharmacists that were out there that I know were dealing with similar pains. And a big part of what we've been trying to do is to normalize more of this conversation, to get people talking about it. Because if we're in a sense, or feel like we're in a sense of community, all of a sudden that changes the perception on how we can address this. And it also allows us to feel more empowered that, hey, I can potentially also move forward with these goals in my journeys. I hear about other pharmacists, that are doing some of these things as well. So it went from sharing my own journey to really becoming, what I see the main thing we do is really becoming a facilitator, a community builder of pharmacists all across the country that want to learn more, engage on this topic, and really help one another on this topic. And yes, it's a business, but I really believe some of the best businesses that I like to follow and believe in as a consumer are those that really are a builder and a facilitator of the community. And that's been one of the things, the fun things about the podcast is, we'll talk about technical topics here or there because, we probably should, and those are important. But I think the most impactful episodes are the stories. They're the journeys. And the technical piece we can learn, or we can hire somebody to help with us, but it's really about having some of that, emotional momentum. So much of personal finance is certainly emotional, and really feeling empowered in the journey. And so, as I mentioned, it started, really as a hobby, kind of identified like, hey, maybe there's something here. As I did some more speaking, eventually wrote a book, and we started a podcast. And then over years, it's really grown into the business that it is today.
I love it. I love the stories. They're my favorite episodes because you do, you do feel very inspired by just the sheer imagination that people have in terms of how they make those savings. And it does give you so many good ideas to where you can cut your costs. I mean, you've even had episodes about buying cars and buying houses, and how people should go about doing that in the US. I mean, it's very different for us in the UK, but the underpinning knowledge and kind of the context there is still applicable to day-to-day life in the UK. And it's genuinely really interesting to see. I mean, we don't come out of university with so much debt, but it's still relatable. And people are always trying to find imaginative ways to kind of move forward and save money. And it's so difficult for people who are young now to even buy a house here in the UK because it's just so incredibly expensive. I saw your email come through the other day about how the interest rates in the US have gone up so significantly, from 1% to 7%. We've got the same situation here. It's absolute madness. And we never learnt about this, in university. The only people who have taught me anything about finance growing up were my parents. And in fact, what they provided was pretty limited. So I'm having to kind of learn on the go. And I feel like there's so many more people out there who definitely feel the same way as I do. How do you feel about incorporating all of this kind of like financial learning into curriculum?
Obviously, I'm biased, but I think it is very much needed. And we're seeing a very exciting shift in this direction, I would say, from even where we were 3 or 5, years ago. And a lot of it is coming from the students saying, hey, we want more of this. We want more of these life application, professional development skills. And I do think part of that is due to our accreditation standards here for doctor of pharmacy programs are through the ACPE, Accreditation Council for Pharmaceutical Education. And there definitely has been a movement, I would say, over the last decade, if not a little bit more, of enhancing some of what used to be called maybe the lesser important or softer skills around things like professional development, self-awareness, entrepreneurship, wellness, overall wellness in curriculums. And so I think there's a much more acceptance of this. I still would like to see this called out specifically as a domain of wellness that needs to be addressed in PharmD programs. We're not there yet. I think we're going to get there. Maybe in the next iteration or two of our standards. And we have good examples here in the US. If you actually look at veterinarian educations in their accreditation standards in the US, they specifically call out financial wellness as a requirement of their doctor of veterinary medicine program. And because of that, I've actually had a chance to work with a couple of vet schools. There is very much a culture around supporting students around financial wellness. Couple cool examples where they even have like an in-house financial planner to help their students, and really making sure that they're providing their students with the best tools that they can, because they know they're going to be faced with a significant amount of debt. And in their case, a lot of them end up owning their own practice, and they need to build some of these foundational business skills, both personally, but also in how they're going to run their practice. So I think we need more of it. The challenge and the pushback we'll get is that it's an already very packed curriculum. But I think we're moving towards a trend, in my opinion, where, not to minimize the clinical knowledge in any way, shape, or form, it's important. But in any trade or profession, we're seeing this movement where, as the access to information gets more and more readily available, the need to just transfer knowledge is becoming less important. And obviously, that information can be learned by someone. They can gather that, and really, from my perspective, today's graduate that's really getting set apart is, you assume there's some baseline level of clinical knowledge, and it's all these other things that are so important. Communication skills, or ability to critically think, to negotiate, interpersonal conflict, right? All of these things, how they approach wellness and balance, and they can sustain themselves throughout a career. And so I really hope sooner rather than later, I think we're going to get there, that we're going to see this as a thread. And thread is an important word. It's not a one-time session on financial wellness. It needs to be a thread across all of the years of the pharmacy program.
I love that. And I completely agree with you. It is definitely valuable, and it's the way forward. I wanted to ask where your passion came to write a book, and can you tell the listeners a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was a fun experience. I always look back at that experience as one I'll never forget, and one I'm not sure I'm going to do again in any period of time here in the near future. Although actually, I'm beginning to think of some ideas here in 23 and 24. Really, the genesis of that came as we were working on starting YFP, and actually a former student of mine who became a business partner, another Tim, ironically, we were doing more education on this topic, and we said, hey, there's nothing out there, as we identified in the podcast as well. There's nothing out there in terms of pharmacists and personal finance, and it really feels like an opportunity to fill that gap with a book resource, but then also as a way for us to really elevate the awareness of what we were doing. A book is a great vehicle to lead to speaking opportunities, going on other podcasts and shows and so forth. So we decided we were going to write a book, and then it became a matter of, well, are we going to try to publish ourselves? Are we going to try to work with a publisher? And we had an opportunity to do that through one of the professional organizations. But we decided, and I'm so glad we decided to go at it ourselves. Now, that created some long nights and some headaches, and a lot of lessons we learned. When you're self-publishing a book, there's everything from, you literally do all of it yourself, the writing, the copy editing, interior design, kind of putting it all together. Or there's also a pathway, which we have done now with our more recent books, where you can still self-publish, but you can work with resources and tools and companies that are out there that are meant to support self-publishing authors. So, designers that can help you, people that can lay out your interior format, and you're really just focused on writing the text. People that can even help with some of the sales and marketing and so forth. So I'm so glad we went the self-publishing route for a couple of reasons. One, it really gave us 100% level of control on finding our voice and what we wanted that to be, which I felt like was so important because, yes, the technical knowledge was important, but I wanted it to be conveyed in a relatable way, that it was really less even about someone becoming a financial expert and more about just lighting a passion that they want to learn more on this topic and be on the lifelong journey towards financial wellness. And I think we accomplished that in the book 7-Figure Pharmacist. So that level of control was really important. The other thing we picked up on really quickly is that if we were going to try to build a business longer term, I want to know who's going to buy our book. And, if I put the book, let's say, only out on a platform like Amazon, obviously it's going to potentially get broader exposure, but I don't know who buys those books. I don't know who they are. I can't interact with them. I can't have a conversation with them. I can't build a community with them as well. So when we self-publish and we built the page, and through that, we're able to, know who are the folks that purchase. We can get them into the community, provide them with other resources. All of that was really important to us, even more so than the revenue that might come from additional exposure through something like Amazon. So that was our journey. Why I joke that I'm not sure I would do it again is we went from idea to publishing in a little over 6 months. And that was way too intense. I had a very young family. At the time, I had 3 of our 4 boys, and my third boy at that time was really young. He was under 2 at that point. And that was a grind of, I was working full time, also working on the business, trying to do my best, obviously with the kids as well, try to write the book. And so it really helped having a co-author that we were able to feed off of one another and kind of keep that accountability momentum. But I probably would have stretched that out a little bit longer.
6 months. Wow. It kind of leads me on to the next question, because I was going to raise the fact that you've got 4 boys and a wife, so you are definitely busy at home. One of the questions is, and I get this all the time personally, is, I've got 5-year-old and obviously a very young 5-month-old baby. And so many people message me or email me or ask me to my face, how do you do it? How do you work full time? Commute 3 hours a day, which thankfully I'm not doing at the moment. Do the podcast, like release all these episodes, social media, have a family. Are you up till 1, 2 in the morning, like every night of the week? Do you do nothing else but pharmacy all day, every day? And the answer is 100% no. Yeah. I'm in bed by 9 p.m. every single day. I'm pushing my bedtime today for Tim, but generally, I'm in bed very early, and I stick to my routine for my mental health and my wellness. It's really, really important to me. But people ask, how do I do it? And I want to ask you the same question. How do you do all of this and have a family of 4 children?
Well, first of all, I wish I was in bed at 9 every night. I'm trying to get better with that. But same type of thing. I am not up to 1 or 2 in the morning. I'm not going to claim that I've always had every day balance through, my career and every season. I think there's constantly a look at what's working, what's not working, how do I shift? And frankly, part of the reason why I got to the point of leaving my work in academia at Ohio State and working full-time in the business is I often joked I felt like I had 3 full-time jobs. I felt like I was trying to be full-time in academics. I was trying to be a full-time business owner and CEO, and I was trying my best to be a full-time father and husband. And I didn't feel like I was doing any of them as well as I wanted to. And for my personality, that is a very nagging feeling. If I feel like I'm not giving something or all of what I have to contribute in an area, that really wears me down emotionally. So that led to, I've got to really move from one of these things and get them off my plate. I think similar to you, well, first of all, credit where credit is due. For our family, what really works and has worked since my oldest was born back in 2011, my wife, Jess, stays home with our 4 boys. Miraculously, she homeschools them, high energy, chaos and all. And that has afforded, a lot of flexibility with schedules. I work from home some days, and that means there's noise in the background. That's the culture of our family. Some days I'm in the office, but there's been a lot of integration and flexibility and give back and forth to make that a reality, for us and our family. I think part of it too is working on something that I am so passionate about that it doesn't feel like a grind or work. Now, I'm very protective of the evening. So typically when I close my computer at 4:30 or 5, outside of a podcast here or there, or webinar, I'm not on my computer at night. I'm picking up the next day after I go through my morning routine and do all that. It really is contained in hours throughout the day. But even in those intense seasons of projects or just the intense seasons of business altogether, or the challenges that will naturally come when you're trying to grow a business, I am so on fire about the mission of what we're doing and the team that we have and the impact that we're having. Like that is the fuel and the momentum through the challenges or through the difficult seasons, or, at times when there's longer days or travel or things that need to be put in. I think the other piece that I would remiss if I didn't mention is like for me personally, I have found that, and it's evolved over time, but every year that passes, I have found more and more that a solid morning routine is absolutely essential to my day. And this has looked differently, when done well, which is not all the time, but when done well, this is about 2 hours of the morning, typically between about 6 and 8 a.m., sometimes 5:30 and 7:30, depending on how kids are sleeping and all of that. And this includes, starting the day with a walk. It includes some meditation, some visualization, some reading, usually some writing, some gratitude journaling. And when I am in that season of doing that well, that becomes really almost like filling up the gas tank for the rest of the day. When I can't do that for whatever reason, I really feel like I'm running on fumes, throughout the day, and that really has a negative impact. So those are a few things, but I think I would just encourage folks, like it's so individualized of what works for you and your journey. And just when you think you've got it figured out, like life changes, right? Family situations, work, whatever. And I think it's something that we're always constantly revisiting and trying to figure out as well.
We are meant to be friends, Tim. I love a morning routine. I am all over it. It's been tough the last few months, obviously, because I'm also up a lot of the night. But I'm back on it. I'm so happy to be back on it. And no matter what, even if I've had a bad night, I'm waking up at 6 at the moment to do some reading, to do my yoga, some meditation, my journaling, gratitude. And if I set my intention for the day, my day goes really, really well. So happy days that you brought that up, because we talk a lot about kind of health and well-being on the podcast. And it's something that I talk about a lot in terms of my personal journey and what does work for me. And that is one of my key kind of winners in terms of what works. So I guess, what does the future hold for you in terms of Your Financial Pharmacist?
We really feel, I really feel strongly that we're on a mission to really change the financial trajectory and wellness of our profession. There's a little over 300,000 pharmacists here in the US. I mentioned before, we've got a little over 15,000 that are active on our email list. I truly feel like we are putting a dent in this issue of financial wellness. And the reason why I'm so passionate about it from personal experience, as I mentioned a little while ago, financial well-being, like other areas of wellness, can bleed into many areas of our lives. How we approach our work, how we approach our relationships. And I'm also very passionate about entrepreneurship and needing more disruption and innovation in our profession. And that is not going to come from someone who is not financially well, right? I really feel like if someone feels like they're in a position of financial strength, they're more likely to lean into their work and maybe take some risks and disrupt within their organization, or even say, hey, what about this? What about that? I'm going to go take some risk and start something on my own as well. And so what I've seen personally, what I see with the clients that we've worked with and the individuals in our community, if they can build a strong personal financial foundation, from that, they can really move with confidence towards really leaning into the best version of who they are themselves personally and professionally. And that gives me a ton of joy. And when we talked about finding your why a little bit ago, that's been an evolution for me, but I keep coming back to this theme of helping people be the best versions of themselves. And yes, I'm doing that financially, right? We're helping to address the financial wellness, the financial pain. But I really believe that's just a piece then of, if they're able to get their financial house in order, that allows them to really lean into maybe other areas that they say, hey, I'd love to do this, but I'm $200,000 in debt. But I feel like I'm struggling trying to raise a young family, whatever would be the but as it relates to their financial situation. So I think we're just getting warmed up doing that. Tangibly, what I think that looks like is we've worked with over 100 organizations providing financial wellness and education. I would like us to have a footprint in every single 140 plus colleges of pharmacy here in the US, continuing to expand our platform online in the education, obviously in our communities and our email lists and our social media channels, and also growing the number of individuals that we're working with one-on-one as well, as that's where we see some of the greatest transformation that is happening. So right now we work with just shy of 300 households one-on-one across 45 or so states here in the US. I'd like to see that closer to 1,000 or so here in the next 3 to 5 years as we look at having a greater impact, and then also helping to serve the broader community of pharmacists that are out there. So I think we're getting warmed up, but at the end of all this, when I look back and 20, 30 years, whatever it might be, when someone else is carrying this torch, I really want to look back and say the work that we were doing was really transforming the financial wellness of our profession that we love. And because of that, individuals were really able to lean in and be the best versions of themselves, because it wasn't their finances that were holding them back from doing that.
I love that. I do. I love that. And I love a 3 to 5 year vision. That's amazing. I guess, we've been through your journey and we've looked a little bit into the future, and I really appreciate you sharing your story with me tonight. I'm sure the listeners will love hearing from you. Most of them are in the UK, but we have quite a big international audience, so it's quite exciting to share about Your Financial Pharmacist. Lots of people will hopefully tune into the podcast, and I will share all the links in the show notes. But where is the best place to kind of find information with regards to YFP?
Our website, yourfinancialpharmacist.com, is really meant to be a go-to place for a variety of educational materials and a way to connect with our community. And then I'd love to connect with folks on LinkedIn as well. Tim Ulbrich, we can connect there. And I'm usually writing about a combination of topics from personal finance to entrepreneurship to fatherhood. So would love to connect there as well.
Oh, thank you so much for your time. Well, in the evening, what time is it for you? Like 4 o'clock?
3:30 in the afternoon. Yes. Nice. Thanks for having me.
Yeah.